My name is Michael, and I thought I had it all figured out. A comfortable suburban life with my wife Jessica and our two kids, Ethan and Emily. We lived in a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where everyone knows each other, and the biggest excitement is the annual block party. Jessica and I had been married for 12 years, and while we had our ups and downs, I always believed we were solid. But as it turned out, I was living in a fool's paradise. Jessica was a vibrant woman, full of energy and charm. She had this way of lighting up a room just by walking into it. When we first met, I was instantly captivated by her zest for life and her infectious laugh. Over the years, she became not just my wife, but my best friend, my confidant. Our life together was good. Or at least, that's what I thought. It started with little things, small shifts in her behavior that were easy to brush off. She began spending more time on her appearance, something she hadn't done since our early dating days. New clothes, a new hairstyle, even a new perfume. At first, I was pleased. It felt like she was rekindling the spark in our marriage. But then, there were the late-night texts and the sudden secretive nature about her phone. She'd smile at her screen, then quickly lock it if I happened to glance over. When I asked, she'd laugh it off, claiming it was just her friend Lisa sharing some gossip. I wanted to believe her, to trust her. After all, trust was the foundation of our relationship. But the nagging doubt in the back of my mind wouldn't go away. Jessica started going out more frequently, always with some plausible excuse. A girls' night out, a late meeting at work, errands that took unusually long. It wasn't just the time she spent away. It was how distant she became even when she was home. She'd sit with her phone, lost in whatever conversation she was having, while I managed dinner and the kids. One evening, I decided to casually bring it up. "You seem really busy these days," I said as we sat down for dinner. "Everything okay?" She looked up from her phone, her eyes widening slightly. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just a lot going on at work, you know?" "Anything I can help with?" I offered, hoping she'd open up. She shook her head, smiling. "No, just some projects. It'll settle down soon." But it didn't. The late nights continued, and the excuses grew flimsier. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at it, and there it was, a message from Steve. Just seeing his name made my stomach churn. She had never mentioned anyone named Steve before. I didn't open the message. Instead, I waited until she was out of the shower. "Who's Steve?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Jessica froze for a split second before replying. "Oh, Steve is an old friend from college. We reconnected on Facebook recently. He's been going through a rough patch, so I've been trying to be there for him." "Funny you never mentioned him," I said, forcing a smile. "It just never came up," she replied quickly, a little too quickly. "You know how it is." That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Who was this Steve? And why was Jessica suddenly so invested in his life? I wanted to trust her, but something didn't feel right. The next few weeks were a blur of suspicion and second-guessing. I tried to focus on my work, on the kids, on anything but the growing knot in my stomach. But Jessica's behavior only fueled my doubts. She became more secretive, more distant. Our once vibrant conversations dwindled to small talk about the kids and household chores. The warmth that had defined our relationship was fading, replaced by an unsettling coldness. One evening, as I was helping Ethan with his homework, Jessica's phone buzzed again. This time, she was in the kitchen, so I couldn't resist. I picked it up and saw another message from Steve. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing." My heart pounded in my chest. Last night? Jessica had told me she was meeting Lisa. I felt a rush of anger and betrayal, but I knew I needed more than just a text to confront her. I needed proof. The next morning, I woke up determined to uncover the truth. Jessica had already left for work, and the house was quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, my mind racing. I needed a plan. I couldn't just confront her with a single text message. I needed undeniable proof. That's when I decided to install a GPS tracker in her car. It felt drastic, invasive even, but I was desperate. I ordered a small, discreet tracker online, one that could be easily hidden and would send updates to my phone. It arrived a few days later, and I waited for an opportunity to install it. One evening, Jessica announced she was going out with Lisa again. I nodded, keeping my face neutral, and as soon as she left, I hurried to the garage. It took only a few minutes to install the tracker under the dashboard, hidden from view. I felt a pang of guilt as I did it, but my need to know the truth overpowered any reservations. The next few days were torture. Every time Jessica left the house, I checked the tracker. At first, her movements were innocuous: work, the grocery store, the gym. But then, on a Wednesday night, the tracker showed her heading to an unfamiliar address. My heart pounded as I watched the little dot move across the map. She stopped at a house in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. I spent the next hour in agony, watching the tracker and imagining the worst. Finally, I saw the dot moving again, heading back home. Jessica walked in a little after 9, her face flushed and her smile too bright. "How was your night?" I asked, trying to sound casual.
"Oh, the usual," she replied, kicking off her shoes. "Lisa and I just had some wine and talked." "Sounds fun," I said, my stomach twisting at the lie.
The next day, while Jessica was at work, I drove to the address the tracker had pointed to. It was a modest house, well kept, with a neat front yard. I sat in my car, staring at it, wondering who lived there. I couldn't just knock on the door and start asking questions, so I decided to wait and see if I could catch a glimpse of this Steve. After about an hour, my patience was rewarded. A man in his 40s came out of the house, dressed in business casual attire. He was tall, with dark hair and an air of confidence. He got into a car and drove off, and I noted the license plate. It was a long shot, but it was a start. Back home, I did some digging online. It didn't take long to find him. Steve Matthews, an executive at a local marketing firm. His social media was a goldmine of information. Pictures of him with various friends, including several of him and Jessica, smiling and looking far too cozy. They went back months, even a year, documenting an ongoing relationship that I knew nothing about. That evening, I confronted Jessica again, this time more directly. "So, how's Lisa?" I asked as we sat down for dinner. "She's good," Jessica replied, not meeting my eyes. "Funny," I said, keeping my tone light, "because I drove by her place today and you weren't there." Jessica froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, leaning forward, "I know you weren't with Lisa. I know you've been lying to me." She put down her fork and sighed, a long, weary sound. "Michael, Who is Steve Matthews?" I interrupted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "And don't tell me he's just a friend." Her face went pale. "Michael, please, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been having an affair." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were from guilt or frustration. "I didn't want you to find out like this." "How did you want me to find out?" I snapped. "When you left me for him? When you decided our marriage wasn't worth saving?" "It's not like that," she insisted, her voice breaking. "We've just been talking. He's been going through a divorce, and I've been trying to help him." "Help him?" I echoed, incredulous. "By meeting him in secret, by lying to me about where you've been." Jessica's tears spilled over, and she buried her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." "Well, you did," I said, standing up. "And now I need to know everything. How long has this been going on? How serious is it?" She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "A few months," she admitted. "It started out innocent, just talking. But it got complicated. He made me feel needed." "Needed," I repeated, my anger boiling over. "And what about me? What about our family?" "I don't know," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I never wanted this to happen." I stared at her, feeling a mix of rage and sorrow. This was the woman I had loved, the mother of my children, and she had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I couldn't just forgive and forget. I needed to take action. As she cried, I left the room, my mind racing. I had the proof I needed, but now I had to decide what to do next. I couldn't let her continue to lie and deceive me, but I also had to think about Ethan and Emily. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about our entire family. The next few days were a blur of tense conversations and awkward silences. Jessica tried to explain herself, but her words only deepened the wound. I couldn't trust her, couldn't look at her without seeing her betrayal. Finally, I knew what I had to do. I needed to confront Steve. directly. The idea of confronting Steve directly gnawed at me, but I knew it was the only way to get the closure I needed. I had to see the man who had come between my wife and me, to understand why this was happening. My anger simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over, but I needed to stay focused. One Saturday morning, when Jessica left to run some errands, I took the opportunity to follow the GPS tracker on her car. As expected, it led me to Steve's house. My heart pounded as I approached his front door, my hands balled into fists. I hesitated for a moment, then rang the doorbell. Steve opened the door, a look of surprise crossing his face when he saw me. "Michael, right?" he said, as if we were old acquaintances. "Jessica's mentioned you." The casual mention of my wife infuriated me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling with barely restrained anger. Steve glanced around, then stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "What's this about?" he asked, feigning innocence. "Cut the crap," I snapped. "I know about you and Jessica. I know everything." His expression hardened, and he crossed his arms. "Look, Michael, this isn't the place for this." "Then where?" I demanded. "Where do you suggest we talk about how you destroyed my marriage?" Steve sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. Let's go for a walk." We started down the sidewalk, the tension between us palpable. I could feel my anger rising with each step, but I tried to keep my composure. "How long?" I asked finally. "How long has this been going on?" "A few months," Steve admitted. "But it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" I echoed, incredulous. "You think this is some kind of misunderstanding? That you haven't been sneaking around with my wife?" He stopped and turned to face me, his expression serious. "I'm sorry, Michael. I never meant for this to happen. Jessica and we just connected. She was there for me during a rough time." "And what about me?" I demanded. "I was there for her for 12 years. Through everything. How do you think this makes me feel?" Steve looked away, guilt written all over his face. "I know, and I'm sorry. But it's not just about you, or even me. It's about Jessica. She was unhappy and You took advantage," I interrupted, my anger boiling over. "You saw a vulnerable woman and you took advantage of her." "That's not fair," he shot back. "We both made mistakes, but it's not all on me." I couldn't take it anymore. The rage that had been building inside me exploded. Without thinking, I swung at him, my fist connecting with his jaw. He stumbled back, shocked, but quickly regained his balance and lunged at me. We grappled, fists flying, the anger and frustration pouring out in a violent clash. It wasn't long before I overpowered him, fueled by the betrayal and heartache that had consumed me for weeks. I landed punch after punch, not stopping even when I saw blood. Steve tried to fight back, but he was no match for my fury. By the time I finally stopped, he was lying on the ground, bruised and battered. Gasping for breath, I looked down at him, the reality of what I'd done sinking in. I had beaten him badly, and I could see the damage I'd inflicted. "Stay away from my wife," I growled, my voice shaking with rage. Steve didn't respond, too beaten and dazed to speak. I turned and walked away, my hands trembling. As I got into my car, I realized I needed to think about the consequences. Jessica would find out, and there would be no going back from this. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. When I walked through the door, Jessica was already there, her face pale. "What happened?" she asked, seeing the blood on my knuckles. "I confronted Steve," I said, my voice hollow. "It's over, Jessica. I want you out." Her eyes widened in shock. "Michael, please. We can fix this. We can—" "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "You made your choice. Now you have to live with it." Jessica's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "Maybe you didn't," I said, my voice cold. "But it did, and now I need you to leave." She tried to argue, to plead with me, but I was done. I couldn't live with her betrayal any longer. I packed her bags and handed them to her, ignoring her tearful protests. "Go stay with your mother," I said. "I'll figure out what to tell the kids." As she walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I had loved her once, but that love had been shattered, replaced by a cold emptiness. Now, I had to focus on picking up the pieces of my life and moving forward. The next few days were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. I filed for divorce, citing infidelity, and sought full custody of Ethan and Emily. It was a painful process, but I knew it was the right thing to do. The kids needed stability, and I needed to protect them from the chaos that Jessica's actions had unleashed. I told the kids that their mother and I were going through a tough time and that she would be staying with their grandmother for a while. They were confused and upset, but I tried to reassure them that everything would be okay. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into my work, trying to find solace in the routine. I leaned on my friends and family for support, grateful for their understanding and encouragement. One evening, as I sat alone in the house that had once been filled with laughter and love, I reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the confrontation, the pain. It was all a part of my story now. But it didn't have to define me. I could choose to learn from it, to grow stronger, to find a new path forward. Months passed and slowly, I began to heal. The divorce was finalized, and I was granted full custody of Ethan and Emily. Jessica's visits were supervised, a necessary precaution given the circumstances. I focused on being the best father I could be, providing my kids with the love and stability they needed. One evening as we sat down to dinner, Emily looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" I smiled, ruffling her hair. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be just fine." Life gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy. I found joy in the little things, helping Ethan with his science projects, watching Emily's dance recitals, and spending quiet evenings at home. The house no longer felt empty. It was filled with the warmth and love of our little family. Through therapy and self-reflection, I came to understand that Jessica's betrayal was not a reflection of my worth. It was a painful chapter in my life, but it didn't define me. I was stronger than the hurt, more resilient than the betrayal, and I had a future to look forward to. I also started to open myself up to new possibilities. I joined a local community group, made new friends, and even started dating again. It was a slow process, learning to trust and love after such a deep wound. But I was determined to move forward. One afternoon, while attending a community event, I met Sarah. She was warm, kind, and understanding. We connected instantly, sharing stories of our past and our hopes for the future. It felt good to open up, to let someone in again. As Sarah and I grew closer, I introduced her to Ethan and Emily. They adored her, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace and happiness. We were building something new, something beautiful, out of the ashes of the past. One evening, as we all sat on the porch, watching the sunset, I realized how far we had come. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I had found a way to move forward, to build a new life for myself and my children. Jessica's betrayal had been a devastating blow, but it had also been a catalyst for change. It forced me to reevaluate my life, my priorities, and my relationships. It taught me the importance of honesty, trust, and self-worth, and it led me to a place of healing and hope. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I held Sarah's hand, grateful for the second chance at happiness. Life was unpredictable, full of twists and turns, but I knew I was strong enough to face whatever came next. And so, with a heart mended and a future bright, I embraced the new beginning that lay ahead.